liberty, liberty forever. Mandates never. Liberty forever.
Liberty forever.
Mandates never.
Mandates never.
Now like you really mean it. Liberty forever.
Liberty forever.
Mandates never.
Mandates never.
Good evening. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for your kind words and your kind hospitality. There is a God. Well, let's do that too. There is a God.
There is a God.
Our rights come from Him.
Our rights come from Him.
The purpose of civil government
Purpose of civil government
is to protect God-given rights.
is to protect God-given rights.
All right, well, that was the rehearsal. Now let's do it. There is a God.
There is a God.
Our rights come from Him.
Our rights come from Him.
The purpose of civil government
Purpose of civil government
is to protect God-given rights.
is to protect God-given rights.
And what you just recited, what we just rehearsed, is fundamentally the quintessential American view of law and government. It's the actual philosophy of law in Maryland, in Maryland, yes, and in America. It is actually set forth pretty concisely and precisely in the Declaration of Independence. We've just sort of paraphrased it, but again, in the Declaration, Jefferson says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, and then he lists 5 self-evident truths. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. But in the meantime, let me thank Jeff and Kate and Mackie and Ron and everybody that put this together, and team. Thank you so much for your warm hospitality. And I didn't realize until he got up and prayed that Pastor David Lewis was here. That was a surprise to me, which indicated to me, among other things, that this must be a very important meeting. Because if Pastor David Lewis is here, this is an important place to be. This is the place. This is my great friend who has with me. 5 self-evident truths. We just talked about the first 3. There is a God, our rights come from Him, and the purpose of civil government is to protect God-given rights. So let me pause right there for a second. This is election season, as you well know. Somebody walks up your driveway, knocks on your door, calls you on the phone, sends you a piece of literature, and they want your vote, they want your money, they want your support, in some way, they want your vote. A very fair question to ask them is this: what's the purpose of civil government? It's a very simple question. It's actually so straightforward it can kind of be a stumper. But just ask somebody that wants your vote, wants your money, wants your support, what's the purpose of civil government? And then do your best to shut up and listen to what they say. And don't help them. Because they will, in the next sentence, if you let them, patiently, they will tell you their philosophy of government. And I've done this, and if you've ever done this, you'll realize that many times that what they start to talk about is something with an entirely socialist sentiment. Because they've been trained up away from understanding what the Constitution says and away from understanding what the Declaration of Independence says. But what does Jefferson say the purpose of civil government is? To secure these rights, the rights he just talked about in the previous phrase, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So the purpose of civil government is to protect God-given rights. It's not to make sure that you, young lady, have eaten your veggies. It's not to make sure you, young lady, are wearing your helmet. It's not to make sure that you have your seatbelt buckled. And by the way, it's not to protect your health. The purpose of civil government is not to protect your health. It's to protect your liberty so you can protect your health. That's the purpose of civil government. So that you are then free to make these decisions about your own bodily autonomy. Okay, there's a God, our rights come from Him. The purpose of civil government is to protect God-given rights. We're that far. That righteous government, the fourth self-evident truth is that government is done by the consent of the governed. The righteous government comes from the consent of the governed. Now, the instrument, the vehicle that we use to declare the consent of the governed is the Constitution. Both the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Maryland. That's the vehicle. In other words, this is what we declare to be the deal, the contract, the compact. I hate these guys. They ought to make a big lip. The deal is set forth in the Constitution. That's the vehicle by which we declare the consent of the government. So you might say that if the government stays within the bounds of that agreement, they have the consent of the governed. But if they deviate from that, if they go outside of what we've agreed that they have the authority to do, then they don't have our consent, right? They don't have our consent, and they don't have, and everything they do at that point loses legitimacy, loses authority. So think about this for a second, if I could ask you. The Constitution of Maryland creates the office of Governor of Maryland. If there was no Constitution of Maryland, there would be no office of Governor. Do you agree with that? There would be no. Okay. So if the Governor then decides to suspend the Constitution, what else does he suspend? Thank you. He suspends himself. He suspends his own authority. Now, if he does that, it's very essential that we know that that happened, that we're aware of it, and can take action against it. But what happens if we're not aware of it? If he does it and we don't know he did it? Let me ask you to do a mental exercise with me. Sometimes we do this with pencil. Let's, in your mind, let's take out a pencil and a piece of paper, okay? And I want to ask you a couple of questions. I want you to write these down, and no cheating, and don't put your cell phones away. Okay. The first question is this. Please list for me the 5 freedoms protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Just list the 5 freedoms. 1, 2, you can do it in a word, you can do it in a short phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. List those 5 freedoms. Okay, now number 2. Please tell me what the Third Amendment is about. You don't have to quote the Third Amendment to me. Just tell me what it's about. Subject matter of the Third Amendment. All right, tell me please what article and section of the Constitution gives the federal government not only the authority but the duty to protect the borders from invasion. Just the article and section. Just read that. Okay, now please tell me how many articles are in the Constitution proper. Not talking about the amendments, just the Constitution. All right, now please, we're up to 5, right? Please tell me what the 17th Amendment is about. You don't have to quote it to me, just tell me what it's about. Folks, how are you feeling about this quiz so far? Are you hoping maybe it's multiple choice? Right? How do you feel about this quiz? The questions I just asked you, and by the way, please, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. Well, maybe a little bit. I'm saying this to challenge you, please. This is the deal. This is the contract. The questions I just asked you really are pretty simple. You should ask them, by the way, of anybody that walks up your driveway or knocks on your door or asks for your vote. You should ask them these. You could ask them these questions, and you have every right to ask them these questions. But you can't ask the questions unless what? You can't ask the questions unless what? You have to know the answers. So you need to know the answers. So I hope I'm trying to make that point that I hold in my hands. By the way, the Declaration of Rights, which is part of the Constitution of Maryland. Okay. Now, over the past 2 years, this Constitution and the rights of the Marylanders have been violated repeatedly, obnoxiously, horribly, unlawfully. I want you to know that all the lockdowns, all the mandates, all the jabs for jobs, all of the forced mandates, none of them have been legal. None of them have been lawful. All of them have violated the Constitution of Maryland. Every single one of them. And just to finish that point, let me just quote to you. Article 44 of the Declaration of Rights says this. It says, provisions of the Constitution of the United States and of this state, being Maryland, apply as well in times of war as in times of peace. and no deviation therefrom or violation thereof based on a plea of necessity or any other plea, like a pandemic plea, based on necessity or any other plea is valid. Ladies and gentlemen, that could not be more on point. No plea of necessity. They've gotten you to think that yes, we have a constitution, and by the way, they've used the power of government, they've colluded with media, major media. They've gotten you to think that, oh, in an emergency, we set this aside. No! You never set this aside. You can't set this aside. As a matter of fact, when there's an emergency, when there's a pandemic, when there's a crisis, that's precisely when you need to follow the rules. That's not when you jettison them or abandon them. But folks, we can't make them follow the rules unless we know the rules. Folks, there are 2 law schools in the state of Maryland. University of Maryland, University of Baltimore. I went to one of them about 150 years ago. Do you know that everybody that graduates from there, presuming they pass the bar and enter into the practice of law, every person takes an oath to the Constitution of Maryland. Do you know that either of those law schools have a course of study in the Constitution of Maryland? They don't have a course of study, and everybody that becomes an attorney takes an oath to it. And then they become judges, and then they become legislators, and then whatever else they become. Right? And nobody studied it. So this deal, this contract that we have with the government is really unknown. It's been indoctrinated out of us. Do you think it's a mistake that either of the law schools, do you think it's just an oversight that either of the law schools have this course? Or is it part of an overall plan and agenda to dumb us down and to not have us know our rights? So, look, we need an Attorney General who knows the Constitution and who has studied it and is willing to. We need the political will to enforce it. We need that. We need that desperately. That is why I'm running for Attorney General, because these things that have occurred in the last 2 years have all been unlawful. They need to be stopped. By the way, they're not done with you. Do you think they're done with you? No. This is all coming back, because now they've established that if it's an emergency, they can ignore it. And they're going to ignore it again, and it's coming back at you.
October time.
So we need to not only make sure that this stops, but that it never happens again.
Right!
It never happens again. I want to leave time here. I don't want to use my time. I'm very, very grateful for the organizers at the time. And I want to leave some time for some questions and answers. But let me just say this. I had a high school debate teacher. By the way, I went to Towson Catholic, which used to be right up the hill here. I grew up on Kenilworth. This is a homecoming for me. I live down here in Annapolis now, but I grew up on Kenilworth Drive over here near Charles Street in the Beltway. And I used to hang around places like this when I was too young.
So do we all.
Is this where Baby Doe's was, by the way? Baby Doe's here?
Yes.
Baby Doe's mine coming? Right. I hang around there. Anyway. I had a debate teacher that said, the result of effective speech is action. Is action. So, if my words are effective, if my speech is effective tonight, then it will mean that you will do something. If you just have a warm, fuzzy feeling and go home and don't do anything, then my speech, my words were in vain. So I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. And number 1, I want to ask you, if you had a little problem with that quiz, fix that problem. Woo! Fix that problem. Learn the United States Constitution, learn the American Constitution, learn the rules of the game, so that you can play it. If you don't know the rules of the game, how are you going to prevail in the game if you don't know the rules? You need to know the rules. Secondly, that's one thing I want you to do. Solve that problem, please. Secondly, please consider voting for me for Attorney General. And if you can, please help me to do that. Please volunteer for my campaign. Miss Mackey's standing over there holding up something. Please, if you can help us in any way, because we need to restore this understanding of government. We need to restore this knowledge. You know, last night I was invited to speak at Salisbury University. I was invited to speak with the other candidates for for Attorney General. I have a Republican opponent. His name is Jim Shallon. He's a very nice man, former prosecutor from Montgomery County. Then there are the two Democrats who are absolutely communists. That's not name calling. They're just communists. And I was invited by Salisbury University. Went down there, but about 24 hours before the evening began, I got an email that said that I hadn't finalized and let them know I was coming, so that they cut me off the agenda. It was absolutely a lie. It was totally a lie.
You're scared.
So when I got there, there's 3 names up on the board. My opponents are there, and they didn't give me a chair. Now God bless Anthony Brown, Congressman Brown, because he's one of my opponents. He got up and got me a chair. Praise God that they did that. But the organizers, my point is this: the Ministry of Truth is right here in Maryland. The Ministry of Truth was taking place in Salisbury. They wanted to cancel me out of that because they wanted to cancel this message that I'm telling you right now. They didn't want that known. They didn't want that heard. And that's all the more reason, Jack Ames, why we have to do something about this. And that's all the more reason why I'm asking you for your help, for your vote, for your commitment. I want to say one more thing before I ask for questions. In my view, because of what happened in the last 2 years, by the governor, the county executives, the health department officials, the unconscionable, authoritative, tyrannical violations of our rights, every member of the House of Delegates had a duty, in my view, to impeach the governor. Every one of them had a duty. But only one of them did. One man in the House of Delegates stood up, did his duty, took a lot of heat, took a lot of mocking, took a lot of laughs, but he did his duty. His name is Dan Cox.